Good evening, good evening. We are here for another Bible study live with Jesus as the Answer Outreach Ministry. We are so excited to be here. We have been having a great discussion all week. And tonight will be no different as we get ready to jump into the Word. Sister Fagan, if you would, start us off with a word of prayer.
Heavenly Father, thank you so much for another day. Thank you for carrying us into the night. As we're about to spend some time in your word, Lord, I ask that you guide us through your word, that you will point out the things that you want to stick with us as individuals, Lord, and that we need here beginning to be transformed by something that was taught here tonight. This I pray in your precious name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. We are getting ready to bring on the screen our reading that we have been following along with all week. Really, not just all week, but we have been studying the book of John for quite some time now as a part of our Bible study, where we are in our Bible study. So let me see. I've got a couple of people who are on with me. So I see Gwen and I see Pastor Taylor. Awesome, awesome. So we got a couple of people already waiting and on. So we're going to have a great discussion here tonight. So to kind of start us off, a little bit of background. We always want to do that just in case there's anybody who has popped in on social media that maybe has not been with us before. So we have been studying the book of John. And we're currently in John chapter 6. And we are talking about Jesus walking on water. At least that's what the caption says in that particular section of the Bible. So we've been focusing in on John chapter 6, verse 15 through 25. We started talking about verse 15 around about Sunday night. And we brought that discussion all the way down to verse 20. But then on Tuesday night, we did a little revamp, found a little bit more meat inside 15 to 20 again, and we still left it at 20. So we had a really great discussion. All right. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to read through our passage, John 6, verse 15 through 25, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So the passage says this. So Jesus, perceiving that they were intending to come and take him by force to make him king, withdrew again to the mountain by himself alone. Now when evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, and after getting into a boat, they started to cross the sea to Capernaum. It had already become dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. The sea began to be stirred up because a strong wind was blowing. Then, when they had rowed out about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and drawing near to the boat, but they were frightened. But he said to them, "It is I. Do not be afraid." So they were willing to receive him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land to which they were going. The next day, the crowd that stood on the other side of the sea saw that there was no other small boat there except one, and that Jesus had not entered with his disciples into the boat, but that his disciples had gone away alone. There came other small boats from Tiberias near to the place where they ate the bread after the Lord had given thanks. So when the crowd saw that Jesus was not there, nor his disciples, they got themselves into the small boats and came to Capernaum seeking Jesus. When they found him on the other side of the sea, they said to him, "Rabbi, when did you get here?" And so this is where we are hanging out and talking about this passage. So I want to pick on somebody real quick. Anna Kay, you're the person I'm going to pick on tonight. from what we have been discussing, what are some things that really have kind of stuck out at for you? And what are some things that you feel like have been important in the discussion that we've had so far?
Okay, I remember in verse 15, a few points came out from verse 15 by itself. We talked about how the people had misunderstood what Jesus' mission was. It was completely different from his actual mission. And we knew them misunderstood because it said that they wanted to take him by force. And it tells me too that they also misunderstood who he was because they didn't seem to get that he already knew what their intentions were. So they also misunderstood who he was. And we definitely talked about the fact that his withdrawal was not a selfish act. It wasn't even because he was afraid of the people. It was really about what was best overall. I think we call it the greater good. That's what we have called.
Mhm.
He knew what was best in that situation. It wasn't about abandoning anybody. It wasn't about being afraid of the people. And as we kept reading, we talked about in verse 17 how it had become dark and Jesus wasn't there, and how the disciples must have been so nervous and so scared without him being there. But then something really interesting came up right after that, because they were nervous and they were scared too. That is true. And then they saw something that made them even more scared. They saw a thing. It said that it was Jesus. I remember it was Sister Gwen who pointed out that because I didn't know that it was Jesus at the time. They saw a thing. They saw something out there.
Mhm.
But then Brian pointed out that just the word "it is I" was enough to calm them. The "it is I" told us that one, they knew him, they knew his voice. They may not have been able to recognize what was out there in the storm, but they knew his voice. And the voice and the "I" was enough for them. They knew it was Jesus, and he said, "Don't be afraid." And that's basically where we stopped at verse 20. Am I right?
Yes, you are. You are very much right. Thank you so much. That was a great summary. So I want to pick on somebody else. Gwen is my favorite one to pick on for this, because we always have to put John in context. What is John about? What's the point of the book of John? Gwen, you want to take this one?
With the heart. Jesus is God, and believe in Jesus.
Belief in Jesus. That is the point. Anytime we start talking about this book, no matter what story we're covering, no matter what period of time, no matter what is being said, the foundation is the belief in God. So while I'm picking on people, and I'm doing it deliberately tonight, let me see. Pastor Taylor, what is the practical message that we need to pull out of where we've been talking so far?
I believe one of the practical message that we should pull out is, what's our motive for believing in Jesus?
Mm-hmm.
Back to what Anna Kay said. So Jesus, perceiving that they were intending to come and take him by force to make him king, did they really want him to be their Lord? Did they really want him to rule over them? Or was it that they wanted the physical kingdom of Israel restored? What's our motive for believing in Jesus? What's our motive for following Jesus?
I love that. I love that. So now, where we left off last night, we stopped at verse 20. It is "I, do not be afraid." And we really kind of honed in on actually where Brian started us off on Sunday, talking about that relationship with Jesus, the intimacy that had to be there for reassurance to come just by the words, "It is I." And then we also talked about the fact that when Jesus says, "Do not be afraid," it really speaks to, the trust and the belief that we ought to have in God. And this idea that all he has to do is say the word, and that's it. We spent a little time talking about the fact that even though Jesus had said, "It is I, do not be afraid," did that mean that the storm had stopped immediately? No. So we made that point that even if we're still in the challenge, just the fact that Jesus is there is enough to dispel all of our fears. So now, tonight, I want us to spend just the next couple of minutes talking about verse 21. And you might be curious about why I'm saying just verse 21, but I think there's a lot in here for us to get out. So verse 21 says, "So they were willing to receive him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land to which they were going." So I'm curious, is there anything in particular that jumps out for anybody from what was just read? Anything that jumps out at you?
They had to be willing to receive him before he could enter the boat.
Mm.
He was willing to.
All right, Gwen, you can't just throw that out there and leave it. You gotta say more. They had to be willing to receive him before he would enter. Why did that jump out at you?
I think about when we receive Jesus into our hearts, we have to be willing to receive him into our hearts, into our lives, before he can work in our lives.
Yes, you're 100% accurate. So now I want us to kind of dig a little bit here. And I'm curious as to anybody who will be brave enough to kind of talk about their own experience here. Willingness to receive Jesus. What's been your experience with this in your own life? We always try to bring it into our personal lives.
Well, I have a real live situation. Just this evening, I called you bawling my eyes out, just bawling, and you having any of it. You said to me, "Do you trust God? Do you believe God is leading? Do you believe God is going to take care of you?" And I could have been there stressing and worrying, or I could have been willing to hear those words that you said, to hear him speaking through you, and then to be willing to say, "You know what? Man up, trust God." That's what you're saying, so trust him. And I've been searching all night for an opportunity to say what that meant, what you did, and you just gave me one. So I had to be willing to accept what you were saying. I had to be willing to receive that God was ministering to me through you. And in so doing, not only was I able to get some sleep, not only was I able, but the stress and the worry and it's okay, who cares? So thank you.
Yes, willing to receive. Thank you for that. When you were talking about that willingness and just having to say, you know what? I have to really hear this. I have to really internalize it, and I have to really just act it out right now. I really have to just believe it. That word that I said, belief, is exactly what it took me back to. So here we are. John is all about belief. And in verse 21, what the instruction to us is that we have to be willing to receive God. So I want to press you guys a little bit more. We've heard from Gwen, we've heard from Pastor Taylor, we've heard from a couple of people. Willing to receive God. What does that look like for you? How have you been willing to receive God in your own life?
For me, what it looks like for me in my own personal life is willing to let God lead instead of me going before him. Because I know a lot of times we like to try to do God's job. So I have to be content and have to listen and also stay in prayer so that I can know how he's leading me. So we have our own ways how we want to be led. But it's a matter of fact of letting it go and letting Jesus lead us.
Latasha, I love how you said it. We have to be willing to do it the way he wants us to do it, not our way. It's so true for us that a lot of times we want to be willing in the way that we think we should be willing, and not really in the way that God tells us to be willing. And so I want to put us back a little bit to verse 20 and then come back to 21 to say this. So they were willing to receive him into the boat. Before they could be willing to receive him into the boat, they had to have a relationship with him. They had to know his voice, so that his voice could be one of reassurance no matter what the trial was, no matter what the storm was. And so that's the same message to us tonight, that we have to have relationship. We have to allow that relationship to move us, to allow us to believe in Jesus and not fear. And then once we're able to do that, then we can willingly receive him and exercise that belief. Now, there's a second thing to verse 21 that I think is really important. And I'm curious to see if anybody can point it out. But I see, Lou, that you're unmuted. So if you want to go ahead before we move to that.
Oh, I was just going to comment. You brought some points out that I was thinking about. The previous statement says, "It is I don't be afraid." I think that fear went from fear to faith and hope, which incurred to their assurance of being willing to receive him. Because if those things had not been eradicated out of their spirit, Jesus would not have been able to get into that boat.
Yes.
And then once he got into the boat, the one NIV said, or NLT said, they were eager, which means they went from fear to eager and acceptance of Christ getting in the boat, in that relationship you're talking about. That calming spirit of what his voice, understanding who his voice was, that it calmed them from fear to faith to hope, to believe him, to let them become willing to accept in the boat, and then to understand that he will take them to the other side. There's a lot of intense changing and transformational there. And I think that with most of our practical life, we do want God to do things the way we do. And sometimes it's hard, even though we may be going through all these processes and learning all this stuff, it's hard to put it into practice when it comes to your own practical experience. Mm-hmm. And to understand that the challenges come, and sometimes we get blindsided with our fear or whatever, or our hopelessness and frustration, and we forget that God is still God.
Yes.
But because of his calming, reassuring voice, that relationship is sparked again, and you understand that, he loves us, he wants the best for us, and that we can trust him.
Yes. Lou, as you're speaking, I can't help but think about the fact that it's not about believing in him for something. And again in 20, they're afraid. They're no longer afraid, sorry. The storm is still raging. The only thing that has changed is that Jesus is there.
Well, the focus changed. They now look at the storm around them, and they focus on that calming, reassuring voice that was in front of them, that created that hope. Because if they had not taken their eyes off the storm, they would never have received the hope or the willingness to let them in.
Yes, you got it. You got it. All right. So now there's a second really powerful part to this verse 21, and I wonder if anybody else can guess at it. So I'm going to read 21 again, and I'm going to deliberately emphasize some things to give you a hint. So they were willing to receive him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land to which they were going.
Yeah. Because I was looking at all the time, we're saying, like you pointed out before, the storm was still going on. All of that was happening. They recognized him, they had a relationship, so they were able to recognize him, they received him into the boat, and at that exact moment, they were where they were supposed to be, where they were going. It didn't say the storm stopped. It said that miraculously, because immediately they were on land. And that, to me, in my own life, that tells me that the moment I let Jesus in, I don't even have to mention what's happening, because this verse doesn't even talk about what's happening. The surrounding circumstances aren't even mentioned. But the moment I let him in, I am exactly where I need to be. And that might simply mean that I am with him in his arms. It could mean that I'm physically where I need to be. It could mean that emotionally, something, there's a change, there's a peace, a calmness. It could mean anything, but I am where I'm supposed to be because I'm with him.
Anarchy, you hit the nail on the head. I can't even say anything more. You hit it right at the point. And I like the way you put it because, again, I'm immediately wherever I need to be. Again, it speaks to this idea of us letting go of a particular outcome or an idea of how things are supposed to be. So for the disciples here, sure, immediately they were at the land where they were going and they were out of the distress of the storm. But before even that, immediately they were at the land, they were immediately comforted. They immediately were no longer distressed. And that was just the presence of Jesus. And so I think that the practicality that we have to take out of John here has to do with exactly what you just said, Anarchy, is that if I am truly in relationship with Jesus, because we have to start there. If I am truly in relationship with Jesus, his very presence assures me. And so no matter what is happening around me, whether the storm is still raging or not, because he is there, I am immediately better. And that immediately better doesn't speak to something happening outside of the fact that Jesus is now here. What do you guys think of that concept? What do you think? Do you think that's right? Do you think that's wrong? Do you think it's a good way to look at it? And how would you communicate that to somebody who doesn't understand Jesus or doesn't understand what a relationship with Jesus can do?
I'm probably just going to.
Go ahead, Gwen.
I was going to say, I'm probably just going to repeat what you were saying, but I like that they received him. They received peace immediately, recognizing him, because they focused on him instead of the storm around them. And so can we in our storms today, even though the storms may be raging, we can focus on him and we can get the peace and the comfort, like you said.
Yes, yes. Love that point, Gwen. There was somebody else who popped in, but I wasn't sure who it was that was speaking.
I was just saying, because you asked, well, for those who have been in church, there are lots of songs out there that talk about the presence and how we're feeling that presence. And this story to me is talking about that very presence. But for somebody, like you said, who has never been in a situation like that, I think the closest I could come to trying to explain that would be asking the question. Think of a relationship you have that feels like a safe place to you. So when you're having a difficult moment, who is it that you're going to call? Who is it that you want to be around? Right? Who is that person that makes you feel calm, that settles you down, or that makes you feel safe? And if that person can relate to that, and you can see that this is infinite times better than that, or infinite times more safe, or infinite times more comforting, that might be the closest I could get to getting an in to trying to explain what it's like to be in the presence of God.
That experience. I want us to ponder something because we're actually getting ready. Boy, that 30 minutes went quick. I want us to ponder something. And if you could do me a favor, just scroll down on the commentary side, right before you see verses 22 through 27. Yeah, you can leave it right there. So right before, and those of you who can see that well, what I'm actually pointing us out to is this second to last sentence right before you see verses 22 through 27. It says, if we have received Christ Jesus the Lord, have received him willingly, though the night be dark and the wind high, yet we may comfort ourselves with this, that we shall be at shore shortly, and are nearer to it than we think we are. And I think that's a really great point for us to pause at tonight and really comfort ourselves with. Because I think a lot of times when we're going through challenges, situations, circumstances, whether it's something emotional, whether it's something physical, whether it's something, in any aspect of life, sometimes we can get so caught up with the thing that's happening, the storm that's raging, that we don't recognize just how close to safety we are. And so my encouragement to us tonight is that as we grow and build this relationship that we have with Jesus, that we would begin to recognize him when he is there. Because guess what? He's always there. And if that is true, which we know it to be true, then there is no storm that is going to be endless. There is no trial that's going to be endless. There is no challenge that's going to be endless. Because once we receive Jesus and receive him willingly, no matter what is going on, we are going to be where we need to be, and we're closer than we think. Pastor Taylor, if you would do us the great honor of closing us with prayer, but right before you do that, I am going to ask Gwen to kind of lead us through what the rest of our week looks like.
Okay, today is Thursday, so tomorrow we will be back for unload and upload at 8 o'clock. Again, that is tomorrow. And then on Sabbath, we have Sabbath Bible studies at 9 o'clock. We have Sabbath worship at 10 o'clock. We have Sabbath Kids program at 10:10 a.m. And then Lima Drive Seventh-day Adventist Church has worship at 11:45. Also, there will be some in Nicholasville at 2 o'clock doing some demographics. Thank you.
Thank you. Pastor Taylor?
Are you waiting on me, Kamala?
Yes, sir. Can you go ahead and pray for us,
sorry.
please?
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I'm praying?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I apologize. Our Father and our God, thank you so much for